Well, let me ask you this. So now people may be watching this program at various times, but right now we're coming up on the Easter season, and so I'd like to ask you about Passover, some of the Jewish holidays that run in sync with our Easter celebration. Is it important for us to honor those Jewish holidays? How do they affect us as Christians?
Yeah, we get asked all the time about the Old Testament. What's the role of the Old Testament? Where does it fit in? And this question is basically that. I mean, these traditions, these Jewish traditions that are cited throughout the Old Testament, what do we do with them? How do they fit in? And I've been in circles, and I'm sure you have too, where people say, well, we really need to honor these traditions, and in so doing, we will enhance our Christian faith. Well, actually, nothing can be further from the truth. In fact, Paul warned Christians against celebrating Jewish holidays. He said, I fear for you. You're observing a Sabbath day. You're observing a new moon festival. There are lots of different Jewish ideas, ceremonies, washings, sacrificing. There's holidays, things that are a shadow or a picture of Christ who's already come now. I mean, we're on this side of the cross, right? I mean, Jesus has now fulfilled the law, and we're released from the law. And so the law for us is nothing but a shadow. It's an ancient picture. And in light of the new covenant, I mean, it's even called a curse. If you're under it, you're under a curse, the Scripture says. So why would we want to go back and study Judaism and then celebrate Judaism when we are now celebrating Jesus Christ? Now, before you take my words and stretch them too far and misquote me, let me clarify that the Old Testament, first of all, is a treasure. It should not be disregarded by any means. The Old Testament tells us how the earth was formed. God spoke it into existence. The Old Testament shows us the faithfulness of God despite the faithlessness of humanity. I mean, the Old Testament shows us prophecy and then helps us understand how more fully Jesus fulfilled that prophecy. If we didn't read the prophecy, we wouldn't know how He fulfilled it. The Old Testament also tells us about God's view of wisdom and how man's view of wisdom is very different from that. I mean, the Old Testament is full of beautiful things. Psalms, many of those have turned into our songs of worship that we sing today in churches across the world. There is a wealth in the Old Testament that we simply do not have in the New. So what do you do with the Old Testament? You study it, you love it, you seek out to God's character, God's nature expressed in the Old Testament, but you're not under it. Now, what about these Jewish holidays? Well, Jewish holidays were for Jews. I mean, Jewish holidays are celebrated because the law requires that they celebrate these things and perform these ceremonies and adhere to these regulations, and God required these things of a Jew. But if you're listening out there, there's a very good chance, I'd say there's a 90% chance or greater, that you are not a Jewish person. You're a Gentile like me. There's lots and lots of Gentiles, lots of people who have a barbaric background, a heathen background. I mean, that's true in my case. I am not of Jewish bloodline. So therefore, I have one choice. I have one choice when it comes to the Bible, and that is I'm invited to the New Covenant. I'm invited to the New Testament relationship with God. I'm invited to what Jesus provided and nothing else. It's not as if I have a choice here. It's not as if my choice is to mix, the old and the new. I can't mix the old and the new because I was never invited to the old. The old for me is impossible. I mean, Ephesians describes it this way. I was without hope. I was without a covenant. I was excluded from the commonwealth of Israel. I was a Gentile, and I still am. And so in order for me to be a Gentile Christian, I come to the new covenant, not the old covenant. And so I come to this new covenant and it alone, and then I really should have nothing to do with the old. In fact, that's why Paul's so mad in Galatians. He's mad because having begun by the Spirit, now they're returning to the law. Now that's not salvation talk, that is daily living talk. Paul was mad, frustrated, because they were returning to the old for daily living after they had already started with the new for salvation. What we need is the new for salvation, and we also need the new for daily living.